Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation about marketing. We have two speakers with us to help explain a little bit more the challenge and the task of marketing your spin-off technology. Our first speaker is Viva Miller, who joined the Strategic Partnerships Office in 2018 as a technology manager. Viva's background is in a Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics from the College of William & Mary, as well as a Master's of Engineering Management from Duke. She also has her Juris Doctor from Rutgers University. Viva's going to be sharing with us some information about patents and trademarks from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Following Viva's presentation, we will hear from Daryl Mitchell. I will introduce Daryl at that time. Aaron, let me remind you, if Viva needs to stop talking, to hit the stop button so that there's no background information. We're welcoming Aaron Majarowitz, who is driving for Viva. Viva is with us as well. We also want to welcome all of the students and the mentors who have joined us. We are recording this session, and it will be made available to all following this presentation. Viva, thank you for joining us, and you may begin.
Thanks, Sharon. As Sharon said, my name is Viva Miller, and I wear many hats. I am a primary patent examiner and also an attorney for the United States Patent and Trademark Office, where I examine patent applications in the computer software development area. And right now I am on loan at NASA, where I'm working as a technology manager. I'm here to give you an overview of the intellectual property system. So let's get started. So what is intellectual property? Intellectual property, or IP, involves creations of the mind and like inventions, novels, paintings, artistic creations, trademarks, logos, and slogans. Just like when you lock your bike up to a bike rack, which is physical or tangible property, you can protect your intellectual property. There are 4 ways in which we can protect our intellectual property. The first way is with trademark, the second, copyright, the third, trade secret, and the final one is patent. Next. So the first type of IP is a trademark. A trademark or a service mark is a brand name. It includes any word, name, symbol, device, sound, color, or any combination used or intended to be used to identify and distinguish the goods or services of one seller or provider from those of others, and to indicate the source of the goods or services. They allow consumers to identify the source or producer of different products and services, which helps with their buying decisions. They encourage trademark owners to provide goods and services of consistent quality and to build goodwill in the trademark. Here are some examples of famous trademarks that I'm sure you all are familiar with. There is the Apple symbol, the Skype symbol, the Girl Scout symbol, the logo for Nike, and the In-N-Out burger symbol. The opposite of a trademark is a generic term, which indicates the type of product independent of the source or manufacturer. For example, nobody owns the generic word car, but somebody owns Ford, Volkswagen, or Tesla as a name indicating the source or manufacturer of cars. One thing about trademarks is that they exist at both the federal and state level and largely serve to prevent confusion on the part of the customer. A company that owns a trademark doesn't own the right to control how people talk about its products. It has the right in order to prevent counterfeiting and confusingly similar names. So if you notice on the Apple and in the In-N-Out burger symbol, there's a little R with a circle around it. These are federally registered trademarks. Next. So a bit about federally registered trademarks. As I mentioned, a federally registered trademark possesses the federal trademark registration symbol. Now, registration of a trademark at the USPTO is not required, but it brings several benefits. A significant benefit is nationwide protection, while protection at the state level depends on use and enforcement in each state. While you can file an intent to use application at the USPTO, trademark owners need to use the mark in commerce in order to retain protection. You can't just think up a great name for a product and own it forever without actually using it. With federally registered trademarks, you have a right to what's called record mark with customs. This is significant because it gives a right to block importation and in some instances seize counterfeit goods. Registered trademarks can also serve as a basis for foreign filing. Finally, a federally registered trademark is published in a U.S. trademark database. And here at the bottom of the screen, I'm sure you can see it, you see some other famous federally registered trademarks that everybody's familiar with: Starbucks, Kellogg's, and LG. Next. So another type of IP is copyright. While the Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property has oversight authority and advises on trademarks and patents, the Copyright Office is part of the Library of Congress. Copyrights protect those IP issues that deal with original works of authorship, such as books, plays, movies, the recording industry, which includes DVDs, musical scores, and sheet music, artistic works such as painting, drawing, and photography, computer programs, and others. The term of a copyright is good for the life of the person who developed the IP plus 70 years. This time was extended from 50 to 70 years in the Copyright Term Extension Act of 1998. The Library of Congress administers registration, and the C with the circle around it symbol can be used without registration. However, anything you write down, paint, or photograph is copyrighted. In other words, copyright protection is secured automatically upon creation when fixed in copy for the first time. But it needs to be protected by registration with the Library of Congress to gain strong protection under the law. And there are several benefits to registration, such as registration establishes a public record of a copyright claim. Registration is necessary for works of U.S. origin before an infringement suit may be filed in court. If registration is made before or within 5 years of publication, registration will establish a prima facie or on its face evidence in court of the validity of the copyright and of the facts stated in the certificate. If registration is made within 3 months after publication of the work or prior to an infringement of the work, statutory damages and attorney's fees will be available to the copyright owner in court actions. Otherwise, only an award of actual damages and profits is available to the copyright owner. Next. There's a question on it's useful if, I can answer that, right? Okay, so it's useful if you've got like any form of writing and that you want to get active so that nobody, infringes on it or uses it without your permission and gets the credit for it. Right. So the next type of IP is what's called a trade secret. A trade secret is any information that provides economic value that is not in the public domain and that has been reasonably kept secret. Certain factors need to be addressed to determine if a trade secret exists, such as the extent to which information is known outside a business, the extent to which information is known inside a business, the precautions taken to guard the secrecy of the information, the savings affected and value in having the information against competitors, the amount of money and effort expended in obtaining and developing the information, and the amount of time and expense for others to acquire and duplicate the information. A little bit of history about trade secrets is that trade secret protection stems from common law of the 1800s. But most states use the Uniform Trade Secrets Act to form the basis of their laws. In 2016, President Obama signed the Defend Trade Secrets Act, or DTSA, into law. It underscored Congress's desire to align closely with the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, which had been adopted in some form in almost every U.S. state. Technically, the DTSA extended the Economic Espionage Act of '96, which criminalizes certain trade secret misappropriations. Some examples of famous trade secrets are the Coca-Cola recipe, KFC recipe, the Big Mac special sauce, the Krispy Kreme donut recipe, the Twinkies recipe, the WD-40 formula, Listerine, and the New York Times bestseller list. The Google algorithm, which I want to make note of, is known for, its search engine, and it's a very, very valuable trade secret. Everyone knows Google uses an algorithm that ranks websites based on many factors, including inbound links, page rank, relevant text, and anchor tags. However, no one except Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, know the exact algorithm for the Google search engine. Next. So just as you can get a trade secret, you can certainly lose it. It should be noted that trade secrets are good for as long as they are secret or not discovered. Therefore, it may be possible for someone without insider knowledge to reverse engineer and discover the trade secret, or for competitors to independently develop the trade secret. So the question then becomes, is it therefore better to keep innovations as trade secrets? The constitutional purpose for patents, another area of IP which I will get to soon, is to promote the progress of science and useful arts. So if we keep all of these things a secret, the progress of useful arts may be stilled or slowed. So utilizing a trade secret is definitely a business decision, and there are times when the use of trade secrets are proved to be warranted, such as the Coca-Cola recipe or the KFC recipe. However, there are times when protection in the form of the last area of IP is certainly warranted, and that is patent protection. Next.
Viva, there's a question that was just asked. Can you see the question?
How much? That's a good question. So I think from my understanding, they have a lot of protection, because if they have established a trade secret, unless someone is able to come up with Google's algorithm on their own, is able to figure out what sort of code that they use to come up with the program, then they have a lot of enforcement in the courts with the trade secret. Okay. Are we good? So what is a patent? A patent is a property right allowing you to exclude others from making, using, selling, offering for sale, or importing the claimed invention for a set amount of time in exchange for information. Specifically important, and important to you guys in Mission 3, a patent can be used to gain entry into and deter others from a market. It can be used as a marketing tool to promote unique aspects of a product. A patent can also be used to assert or enforce rights against an infringer or a competitor. It can also be used as collateral to obtain funding. You can also use a patent to create revenue, like selling or licensing, like any other tangible property you can think of. One can be granted a patent only if it is new, useful, non-obvious, enabled, and a clearly described process, machine, manufacturing technique, or an improvement of any of the above. The patent gives you exclusive protections and rights to your invention for 20 years. Next. So patents play a very important role. They can protect inventions, encourage inventions, promote commercialization and an application of an invention. And this is, again, how patents play an important role for Mission 3, since an invention is actually being utilized. They can also accelerate the commercialization of an invention to the whole society. Ooh. Uh-oh.
Amber, if you reset the slideshow and then fast forward to the current slide, it will reset everybody who came in late and didn't see the start of the slideshow.
Dave, could you say that again, please?
If you reset to the beginning of the slideshow, it will allow everyone who came in late to have the slides loaded. And if they came in late and you started the presentation, then they didn't see the beginning.
Okay, Dave, this is Sharon. Can I do that reset?
Anybody can, yes.
Can the students now see the slides? Student roll call. Let me reset them one more time. Please don't touch the reset button. And then as soon as I ask, I want to see if you can see the slides where we are. Wait for just a moment. I'm going to reset. Students, please let me know if you can see the current slide. For those who are having some issues seeing the slides, we are recording this. We will share this with you so that you'll be able to see all of the pieces. Continue, please.
Please continue to the next slide, the types of patents.
Viva, do you want to start again, please?
We're on a new slide. The types of patents is the title.
Yes. Is this correct? I'll move to that.
Yay! Okay. So there are three types of patents: the utility, design, and plant. Utility patents protect processes, machines, articles of manufacture, and compositions of matter. Design patents protect the way a product or article looks or the ornamental expression. Plant patents protect newly invented strains of asexually reproducing flowering plants, fruit trees, and other hybrid plants. Next. So the question becomes, when should you file for a patent to get protection? There are particular times one should file for a patent, since the United States is a first inventor to file system, meaning just what it says. First inventor to file gets the rights to the patent. For international protection, the patent filing must be before it is disclosed to the public or in the public domain. For only U.S. protection, the patent can be filed within 1 year after public disclosure. Next. So let's say you have this great idea and you want to make sure no one steals your idea. There are 5 steps to protect your invention. The first is pre-filing. Before submitting a patent application, you need to do some homework. The basic premise of a patent is that it protects something that has never existed before. Try determining to the best of your ability if your idea already exists by performing a basic patent search. Second is filing a provisional application. The provisional application for a patent is one of the most popular ways for entrepreneurs to get their foot in the patent door. The provisional application is not a patent, and it does not provide actual legal protection. But what it does is guarantee you a filing date with the USPTO and the ability to use the term patent pending as a warning to would-be infringers. The provisional will give you a year to test the marketplace, gather investors, and figure out your next move. In other words, it serves as a placeholder. After that, you'll need to file a corresponding non-provisional. It also costs just $65 for micro-entity filers. This micro-entity status was established following the passage of the America Invents Act, or AIA, 2011. The USPTO created the special filing status for inventors who qualify as a micro-entity. This provides a 75% reduction in most patent filing fees. There's also a small entity status that reduces the fees by 50%. So I'm just going to kind of go through the rest very briefly for the sake of time. So next slide. The fourth way to protect your invention is via pro bono and pro se programs. And finally, the fifth way to protect your invention is via patent maintenance fees. Next. So just a brief summary of what I get to do at my job. My job involves a few to read and understand the invention or application. I also determine whether the application is adequate to define the metes and bounds or the boundaries or limits of the claimed invention. I also determine the scope of the claims or what the claims cover. I also search existing technology for the claimed invention. And I determine the patentability of the claimed invention. And I also write what's called an office action that notifies the applicant of the application's patentability. Next. So the examination process involves a series of steps. When a patent application comes in front of me, I do an examination or a first examination and then issue an office action. And from there, I either do what's known as a non-final, or I am basically allowed to issue the patent and allow the case which allows it to become a patent. The applicant responds with an amendment, which is a change or an update to the claims in an attempt to put them in a better condition for allowance. And I do a second examination and I determine whether these newly amended claims are patent eligible or allowed. If I determine that they are not allowed, I send out another final rejection, meaning the prosecution is closed. The applicant can respond in two ways of this final decision. He can appeal my decision, and it goes before the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, or he can request for me to continue to examine the patent with further amended claims. That request is typically granted. Next. So in summary, here is an overview of the intellectual property system by laying out what is protected by each item of intellectual property and examples of what it covers and how long the protection lasts, since each protection has a time period before it goes into public domain. So you can see patents, you've got design patents, copyright, trademarks, and finally the trade secrets, which have all been discussed in the previous slides. Next. And I just wanted to show you guys that a single commercial product may be covered in different aspects by multiple patents, trademark, copyrights, and trade secrets all at the same time. A good example of this is the mobile phone. The mobile phone, it has trademarks, it has utility patents, copyrights, trade secrets, and it also has design, so you can see all of what is kind of going on in this one device. Next. Finally, if you go to the uspto.gov/kids, there are numerous relatable everyday examples of how patents and other various intellectual property are in our everyday lives, and this website will give you examples of that. Next. So in conclusion, my goal was to provide an overview of the intellectual property system. I really, really appreciate your time, and I hope that you were able to gain more insight. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions before we move on to our second presentation? If you have any questions, please chat them, type them in the chat box. For the sake of time, we're going to move on to the second presentation. We will have an opportunity to hear from Daryl Mitchell. Daryl is the Chief of the Strategic Partnerships Office. Daryl's work at NASA actually began as an engineer, working as the lead magnetic test engineer in charge of Goddard's unique world-class spacecraft magnetic test facility. Daryl is currently just become the Chief of the Strategic Partnership Office, and their focus is how to use NASA technologies and spin them off into innovations. Daryl, thank you so much for joining us, and begin as soon as you would like.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. So you hear me okay? So Eva just gave you a pretty comprehensive look into the different types of intellectual property and how they work and what the rules are. What I'm going to try to do is talk to you a little bit about the importance of some of the other business considerations into what Viva talked about. Because one thing, it's good to have great technology, and certainly having a patent or some form of intellectual property protection is a valuable asset. But I was going to talk to you a little bit about trying to wrap your mind around just how valuable is your intellectual property or your technology or some other things that you might have as you're trying to formulate your business plans. So next. So it's pretty easy once you're focusing on working on your technology to to really get focused on what a cool technology is and the neat things that it does for you and how it makes your life easier. And those are all important. However, to become an innovation, something that actually goes out in the market and that's going to help other people, there has to be something more. You have to understand the business aspect of it. It's not just about the technology. There's a lot of business considerations that can direct how you bring the technology into the market. And so I'm going to talk about some of those things, including a business or marketing plan, which I saw somebody had a question earlier about whether that was going to be covered. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that to give you some help there. Just hang with us. We'll get to that towards the end, but we are going to talk about that. So next. This one, I just included a few key terms. Hopefully you're familiar with a lot of these, but for those you're not, you can always refer back to this. Viva talked about invention and intellectual property. So hopefully you have an even better understanding of what those terms refer to. But I'm going to talk about what you need to consider for commercialization, and that's where you take that idea, that intellectual property, and you find a way to take it to market and create a product out of it that that get out into the population and help others outside and create revenue so that you can keep a going business concern, if that's what you're looking at. Looking at a couple of different ways to analyze that. There's something called SWOT analysis. We can look at return on investment. And then we'll also talk about marketing, what that is, and as I said, about the marketing plan and the business plan portion. So, next. So, as I've kind of been alluding to here, when you're going to take something into market, it's not enough that it's just a really cool technology. It has to benefit someone in some way, whether that's economically, creating jobs, creating a lot of sales for revenue, socially, whether it improves our lifestyle as a nation or globally possibly, or if it gives you some strategic advantage over your competitors in the market that allows you to capture more of the market. All these things are things that you need to think about as you're trying to decide what to do with your technologies. So when you're looking at your technology, there's a good chance that what you might originally think is the right application or the right market for that technology, what might be the most obvious application. Sometimes it works out that is not necessarily the best way to enter your technology into the market. There might be some other applications that maybe some of the barriers are easier to overcome, they're not so high. This is kind of common with technologies that might have, say, medical applications, and then also have other kinds of applications. If it's got medical applications, you might have to go and get FDA approval, and that requires a lot of testing and a lot of money to invest in, and a long lead time to get your product out to where you could actually sell to someone. And while it might be a great application, there could be some other application, it might be material testing or something like that, where you don't have quite all of those barriers. So that might be a way to get into the market and then eventually move into other markets, including the one you maybe originally envisioned. But you have to look at what the benefit proposition is. Who's the audience, what's in for them, and how is it going to help them. So we at NASA, in the case of this contest, we're kind of giving you insight into some technologies where our folks have developed a technology, but now you have to think strategically about how can I take this technology for an application that people will really want this technology to the point where they might go out and buy it. and use it in their everyday lives, as opposed to whatever other options they have. So, next slide. And so, when you start a commercialization effort, you have to have pretty thick skin, because you have to go into it knowing that it is a very difficult undertaking. It's something that, actually a small percentage of companies or startup companies that go into business, most of them don't make it for various reasons. Some of them because maybe they didn't do the due diligence that we're kind of asking you to learn a little bit about through this contest, doing things like having a good business plan or marketing plan to kind of guide them as they go down the path of trying to grow their business, and they might get lost along the way because they don't have something like that to refer back to. So, commercialization is hard. It's harder than you think. It's natural to kind of focus on, the difficulty of doing the technical work where you're taking the technology and either building it or figuring out how it's going to fit into a product, or what more you need to do. But you need to also factor in, all the other considerations that go into that as well. Next slide. So, for those of you who are wondering, okay, so what do I do next at least in terms of the contest? I would advise to get started that you want to understand the kind of the true value of your product, of whatever the technology and the spin-off idea that you came up with for your projects. You want to understand what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. What kind of market might that appeal? What kind of place in the market would your technology have? What would be the competitors for that? And what is the intellectual property situation with that technology? Does NASA have a patent that you could license? Or is it something that maybe NASA doesn't have a patent, but you have an idea of how to incorporate it into something else that you would possibly might get a patent on? Or it could be something totally in between there. Or there might be, you have Viva talked about trademarks. Maybe you have a really cool trademark or something like that that you can leverage. So there's a lot of things to consider, and that would go in your business plan as you're kind of thinking about how to take this cool technology that you've come up with a great idea how to use, and how to get others excited about it. So next slide. All right. One of the kind of a basic business tool, if you haven't seen it before, that gives you kind of a very, it won't be a matter of you put the data in and a number comes out, kind of quantitative analysis, but it gives you qualitatively an idea of where you can, what your benefits and your weaknesses are for your technology. It's something called a SWOT analysis. And SWOT stands for, as you can see on the chart, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what you basically do is each one of those quadrants, you kind of populate it with aspects of your business or your technology or whatever it is you're trying to analyze. You can actually use this for other things besides business, but here we're kind of focused on the contest. We're using it for your spin-off case. And you kind of characterize these so that it gives you a chance to think about them. And in the process of thinking about what these are, it'll help guide you in terms of thinking about how you either use them to your advantage or what steps you can take to deal with the ones that might be a disadvantage for you. And as you can see here, the strengths quadrant is in the upper left-hand corner. So when you're looking at strengths as well as weaknesses, which is in the upper right-hand corner, those are things that are basically internal to you or your organization, things that you have some level of control of. So, for strength, you might ask questions. You see in the boxes around the outside, I put some bullets there to kind of give you an idea of the kind of things that you would put in those boxes. So for a strength, you might say, what unique or low-cost resources do you have that other companies don't have? Maybe you have access to employees that are less expensive than what your competitors have because of where they're located, or you have, what do you do better than someone else? Maybe your employees have a special knowledge or expertise that nobody else has that is a strength for your company. Weaknesses are kind of the flip side of that coin. What can we improve in our business? What are the what are things that could happen that could cause us to lose sales to our competitors or in general? What do people in the that are potentially customers, when they're looking at your product versus someone else's, what is something that they see as a weakness? So, which is also kind of things that are internal to your organization. So strengths and weaknesses are internal. Obviously, strengths are helpful, weaknesses are harmful things. But to complete the SWOT analysis, you don't just look at the strengths and weaknesses. You got to think about how you can leverage those, or how those strengths, or how you can deal with those weaknesses, and that's where the opportunities and the threats quadrants come in. Opportunities and threats are kind of external things. Opportunities might be maybe there's a new government policy that's coming due next year that would require businesses to do some kind of testing that your technology is the best in the world at doing. That's a great opportunity that potentially businesses all over are going to be forced to do this testing, and you have the best solution. That's a great opportunity. Maybe your uncle is Jeff Bezos, and he promises that he'll use his Amazon resources to ship your product all over the world for free, and lots of advertising. But there's a lot of different ways that the opportunities can come up. Threats tend to be again external, or obstacles. It could be some kind of new law that's coming up that would make your technology obsolete. Or is somebody else got some technology that will be coming out in the next couple of years that once it does, your technology will be obsolete at that point. These are things you need to think about, and by doing the SWOT analysis, it gets you started thinking and guide your thinking towards, what are the issues here, and how can I either use them or deal with them so they won't sink my business. Next. So, a lot of times when we talk about technology, we refer to it as innovation. There's innovation, there's invention. Innovation is where you're taking that technology, that invention that people talked about, and you're actually taking it out into the market where people can use it, or into the public where it can have an impact. And innovation, I'm guilty of it too. A lot of times we kind of use it as one word that covers everything, but there are different flavors of innovation. And depending on what type of innovation your technology might represent, can also impact how your business plans are kind of shape up. And here there's different ways to look at this. I've kind of put one up here that I like personally, but it looks at if you kind of graph particular technologies, its technological progress versus the market impact, you can kind of divide it into 4 regions, and by far the largest is incremental, and most technology tends to be that way, that you made some small improvement to an existing technology that makes it a little bit better. And most technology and innovation is of this nature. Maybe you got a new operating system on your phone. It's a little bit better, and it gives you nicer features, but it might not raise itself to the level of a game-changing technology, which is in the upper right, where you have, they totally transform markets. It's kind of like when the cell phone was developed. before there were cell phones. It's changed the market, it's changed our lifestyles, it's changed everything. Breakthrough, you have a big technological advance on technology over what you had before, which gives you some market differentiation and opportunities. And then there's kind of disruptive innovation where it's not necessarily about, the technology has gotten all that, usually better. It might not have changed at all. It actually may have slipped backwards somewhat, but it changes the way that your business model is structured. An example of this might be prepaid cell phones. They don't typically have all the features that you do on, the new iPhone or the new Samsung, but by the way, the fact that you can do them prepaid, you don't have to get locked into a contract. It kind of changed the way that business is done, and it's created its own market niche as a result. So you might think about these things as well as you're thinking through your business and marketing plan. Next slide. This slide, I won't go through this a lot, but just keep in mind that there are different factors as you're looking at your technologies to determine which technology you might want to go with. Typically, hopefully you were looking at multiple ideas for your project before you got started, and you did some kind of a down select process to choose which one you wanted to go with, and this kind of gives you an idea of where your technology falls. Is it an early stage concept only kind of technology, or is it something that you could take it and just put it in some shrink wrap and sell it on in the marketplace as it is? That's a big advantage if it is. And there's things like timing, how easy is it to use, going back to everything you learned from Viva, is there intellectual property protection or not? And then there's the market. What kinds of markets are there out there, and how much does this play into those markets? How much of that market is this really important to? So you want to look at your technologies and kind of look at these factors and kind of give yourself a grade on where your technology stands in terms of how much work will go into actually commercializing it. Next slide. I'm running low on time, so I won't be able to go into a lot of detail on the business plan, but a business plan is really important. There's a little cartoon in the lower right-hand corner kind of tries to point out that once you start moving forward, it's easy to get distracted and pulled off on tangents. Having a business plan is important because up front you sit down and you think about where you want to go with your technology. Use some of these things I just kind of talked about before to decide where you want your company to go, and that it can help keep you focused moving forward to as things change, we'll adapt, but having a sound plan up front gives you that that structure that you can keep pushing in the right direction and not getting off on a tangent, which is where a lot of companies, especially startups, tend to fail. And especially when you get to the point where the company's growing and there's a lot of changes, it's easy to get off on a bad tangent that could be detrimental to your company. And one thing I will point out there, the last item there is one that people don't tend to think about a lot, but it actually is a very important point, and that is, what is your exit strategy? Even though you're just now forming your company, you want to have an idea of where, ultimately, where do you want to exit? Do you just want to get this company up to a certain size and then, sell it off to, a larger, an Amazon or some other company? Do you want to continue to grow? Do you want it to branch out into other fields? What do you want to do? It's good to know that in advance, and that can guide your decisions going forward with the company. Next slide. So, in addition to, I've listed here a few things that would be good things to consider to put into your business plan. You can go online and Google business plan. There'll be a lot of different templates that they'll share with you. But this is kind of some of the key points I would recommend that you would consider in your business plan to kind of help you, again, keep you focused on where it is you want to go with your technology, and how to keep your company moving forward. Next one. I want to also point out, besides a business plan, a marketing plan is also something that is very important. A lot of people, when they say marketing, they only think about, how we're going to advertise it, how we're going to promote it. That is part of marketing, but it's only one part. Marketing is also about understanding the market, and you need to do that in order to be able to figure those other things out. So it's your markets, your competitors, who your customers are, and how you can best meet those needs. So I would recommend that you consider these things here. There's other things you could, but at a minimum, there's kind of 6 key areas that you might want to focus on for your marketing plan, because ultimately your marketing plan, your marketing group, typically in a company anyway, they're the ones who actually tend to generate a lot of the revenue to keep the company going. You can't keep a business going without money coming in. So having a good marketing plan can help you ensure that you keep your revenue coming in and you keep moving forward with your technology, getting it out to people. Next slide. So one thing that's very important as well, and we won't have time to really go into detail on it, but communication, telling people about your company, and doing it, effectively and succinctly is very key. One thing that a lot of people talk about is an elevator pitch. You might want to consider what your elevator pitch would be for your spin-off if you happen to, kind of the analogy is if you happen to be getting into an elevator one day and you look over and, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or somebody with a lot of money is sitting on there with you, and you have, 1 to on investing in your idea, you have to be clearly and get the idea in a short amount of time. And that's actually much harder than talking in a very long dialogue with them. Getting it boiled down to just a few key points, that takes a lot of thought. So I would encourage you to think about developing an elevator pitch for your spin-off idea as well. Next slide. This should be my last slide. And look, another thing to consider, all this kind of wraps together to come to the point of just because you have a great technology and there's a market, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best path for you to follow with this particular opportunity. You need to look and see, is all the work you're putting into this effort, are you going to reap enough benefits at the end to make it worth your time and effort to have done so? Typically, people think about that in terms of return on investment or ROI. Kind of put there's different ways to calculate it, but the very basic way to calculate it I put there on the slide. It's a simple, versatile way to kind of get an idea. If I put all this time and effort and possibly on the outside money into this, is this going to be worth my time to have done it? Is it going to get out there? Is it the return going to be sufficient? And you can look at this to see if that is. Now there's, you can play games with the numbers about, how you claim your costs and what your gains are, and you can play around with that. So, you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt, but this will give you, if you're honest about your numbers and objective, it'll give you some idea of, whether it makes sense to move forward with this opportunity or not. So I would also encourage you to think about this for your project as well, if you haven't already. And that concludes what I had to share with you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Daryl and Viva and Aaron, I think the students who were joining us needed to go off to class, but the recording of this is going to be very important to that group of students as well as those who couldn't join us. And Daryl, would you mind if I pull a slide or two from your deck, the marketing plan one in particular, to share with the students?
Oh, absolutely, Sharon. You can share any that you would like to with them.
Wonderful. Thank you Thank you. I would like to very much thank Daryl Mitchell and Viva Miller for joining us today in World and Theater 2. We will be sharing this recording with all those who are participating in the Enrolled Opsparc Challenge, and we look forward to seeing how this might help inform the decisions that you'll be making with the marketing plan. Viva, Aaron, and Daryl, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck, everybody.